All wings report in, because in this week's episode of Star Wars Rebels, we finally get to see the secret origins of Wedge Antilles, a former Imperial pilot who will go on to be one of the most skilled pilots in the entire rebellion. Fans of old school Star Wars imagery are certainly going to eat up this week's episode. It was filled with Imperial pilots, TIE fighters, TIE interceptors, TIE bombers, and it was all held together by the badass glue that is Sabine Wren, who was the star of this week's episode, despite the fact that this one was really all about Wedge Antilles, who is one of the most important characters in the Star Wars series. He's basically one of the biggest badass pilots from the entire Star Wars canon, a lot of that owing to the fact that he was instrumental in destroying not only the first Death Star, but also playing a direct hand in destroying the second. The story this week is that the Rebellion is desperate for any pilots that they can find, and they're trying to find anyone who will defect to the Rebellion, and they decide that they're just going to go ahead and jump right into the Viper's Nest, because they're going to go to this Imperial Academy to try and find any pilots who are just willing to join the Rebellion. And it just so happens that they end up meeting one of the most famous ones in this episode, Wedge Antilles. And for fans of Empire Strikes Back, Hobby also appears in this episode and officially joins the Rebellion as well. That's a pretty obscure reference, by the way. This was a very Sabine-heavy episode, and frankly, I'm okay with that. For the most part, Kanan and Ezra are just sort of in the background of this episode. They're piloting this Rebellion ship, and they're just supposed to show up at the last second to save Sabine and any other pilots that they can get to come along with them. The reason Sabine is so cool in this episode, though, is that she actually has a history with the Empire. She's actually been to their academies, so she knows how all of this goes down. But what I really loved about this episode was just getting to see the training of the Imperial pilots themselves. When we go to this academy and Sabine ends up infiltrating it, we get to see all their training sequences and even them going through a simulation, which is really intense, not only because it's great to see a nice thrilling space battle, but you get to see that the Empire really tries to make all of their pilots as evil as possible. What I mean by that is, at the beginning of the episode, there's this scene where there's this rebel ship which is coming through, they get intercepted by some TIE fighters and some TIE interceptors, and even the ship that has no weapons still ends up getting blown to frickin' smithereens. And that's what happens in the training session. They're getting ready to attack the ship, which is completely unarmed, and Sabine doesn't want to do it. It goes against protocol. However, this is all actually part of a test, and she was supposed to take the ship down, and this entire academy is being led by this guy by the name of Scarus, who apparently is some sort of badass TIE interceptor pilot. We got to see some of his skills in this episode, and I'm sure he's going to return for another twirly mustached revenge. Speaking of the Empire themselves, not only do we get to see Commander Price actually fighting against Sabine Wren in this episode, which was just awesome. These two really know how to fight each other, and it's actually kind of refreshing to see like just a straight up bare knuckle brawl, because we're always seeing blasters and lightsabers. And Price gets her ass handed to her, so Sabine Wren meets up with Wedge Antilles and the other pilots who want to defect to the Rebellion, and they decide that they're going to take this TIE bomber and just try to escape and meet up with Ezra and Kanan. And of all the people on this base to actually let them escape, believe it or not, it is Kallus himself. He's actually returning the favor to, of all people, Garazeb Aurelios. I'm not sure what the deal is with Kallus. Maybe he's just trying to make sure that Price looks bad. Maybe he just wants to get back up in the rankings. Maybe he could actually be the other Fulcrum. That's another thing they bring up in this episode, is that when the Rebels are actually talking to some of their secret benefactors, they call them Fulcrum. It wasn't just for Ahsoka, it's for a lot of the other people that they do dealings with. So it would be really funny to see that Kallus turned to leave so much that he actually decided to do this, although I have a feeling that's not really what's happening, but just a little speculation on my part. Really, though, this episode did a great job of introducing the character of Wedge Antilles and seeing how he actually defected from the Empire and became one of the greatest pilots in the Rebellion. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Star Wars Rebels? Any episode that involves Sabine is instantly going to be interesting, and I know she's going to be pretty important in this arc as well. The big preview mentioned a lot of things which are going to be going on with the Mandalorian, so I can't wait to see when that's going to manifest. But this episode was all about her being a badass, infiltrating Academy, and bringing some brand new soldiers into the fold of the Rebellion. And just like the last couple of episodes when they got those Y-Wings, this one is still giving me that feeling that this is the most early days of the rebellion, and we're actually getting to see it built in this show. Initially, I always thought that the Ghost Crew was just going to be sort of just another offshoot of the rebellion, just another random group. They're almost fully instrumental for the actual creation of this organization, and getting to see some of its like key characters, the higher-ups, the pilots like Wedge Antilles actually come into the fold in this series is really damn thrilling. And it's great that the series doesn't have to like rely entirely on old characters, but new characters as well. Like, I was really excited to see Wedge in this episode. I'm a huge fan of the original Star Wars movies, so seeing a character like that really rocked my jollies. But Sabine was just so awesome in this episode. I've always fallen in love with this character ever since I saw her in the first season, but she manages to get even cooler as it goes on. The fact that she can infiltrate just about anything, because no one really knows what she looks like, but after this episode, I have a feeling that she's not going to be that anonymous anymore. The Empire has a lot of information about her, and that's definitely going to cause a lot more tension for the Ghost Crew as well as for the Rebellion. That being said, this was a very thrilling episode, which I think did a great job of like showcasing one of the other best things about the Star Wars universe, which are its epic space battles. I mean, lightsabers are cool, force powers are awesome, but I also really love the space battles. I love the designs of the ships, the things that they can do, the intensity of them. It's just awesome, and it was all on display for Star Wars fans in this week's episode of Star Wars Rebels, The Antilles Extraction. And this was a great episode of the series. I loved this one. Old school Star Wars fans are definitely going to love this one. And if you're still on the fence about Star Wars Rebels, just get rid of your fears. Every episode just gets better. Every season just gets better. This is a great addition to the Star Wars universe, and so is this week's episode. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I absolutely loved it. So check it out, Star Wars fans. Check it out, non-hardcore Star Wars fans. Animation fans, check it out too. You might see something you like. If any of you did watch this week's episode of Star Wars Rebels, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. What did you think about the origin story of Wedge Antilles? Did you love Sabine in this episode? Was there something you didn't like about this episode? What do you hope to see from the rest of Star Wars Rebels? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you can see all of our latest videos, such as anime reviews, Star Wars Rebels reviews. I'm even reviewing Luke Cage from Netflix. Make sure to leave me a comment and like the video as well. Thank you guys again for watching. And as always, may the Force be with you.